All right, hey, welcome. We're here doing the Nova Files podcast. I'm Peter from Medallion Comics.
And I'm Ian Miller from Triple Threat Comics.
Yeah, and join us as we talk about a bunch of random stuff that pops up into our geeky heads.
Crazy. That's true, because the multiverse theory is pretty much history branches in two. We create one Earth, we make the choice, and a second where you didn't. So yeah, it's logical that way. And a lot of people were left confused at the end of the end game because Steve goes back to the past. I'm like, let's follow the rules of time travel for a second. The Steve that we come to know is still frozen in the past. So the Steve in the future that goes back into the past, and lived out his whole life at that point.
Yeah. In his case, that was probably a split timeline where he lived out his life.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just think it's highly irresponsible if he traveled back in time with all that knowledge. Like Jesus Christ, he'd let Howard Stark die?
Mhm.
But yeah, no, it's like, that's what happened. Like he went back in time and lived out his life and then returned to the other timeline to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And
well, I think he'd follow the logic saying, if I do anything to really mess up this timeline, that will create even more branches.
Mm-hmm. I know, like I said earlier, for Dragon Ball did time travel smart in that they had. Did you ever watch Dragon Ball?
I watched the first years. I haven't seen the rest of the series.
Okay, but you know, like who Trunks is?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. In Trunks' timeline, everyone died, so it went back in time to give Goku medicine that wouldn't exist for another few years. So what does that do? It changes the timeline. But the second he went back and altered things, more things started to change because of the new deviation in the timeline. For example, the androids were even stronger in that timeline because Goku was still alive, theoretically. But when Trunks went back to his timeline, he found out that nothing had changed, that everything was the same. That's because, when you travel back in time with future knowledge and you affect the past, where does that future knowledge, information, and that person come from? That person would just be removed from the timeline. So, you just erased your timeline. You just erased the person who went back in time, which prevented any of the changes from happening. It's a paradox.
It's like the Flashpoint Theory.
Mm-hmm. What's that?
Well, you remember the storyline Flashpoint, right?
Yeah.
Where Flash goes back in time and to prevent his mother's murder. So in doing so, even though he had knowledge of the future, he changed it drastically, and any real knowledge that he had, of his powers were gone. He knew the Speed Force. He knew, who he was, but as the story progressed, his memories were starting to change to fit this particular new timeline. So that knowledge was being rewritten.
Yeah, but once again, that's like lazy time travel writing. Like what would they say? Yes, when you traveled back in time, you created a time quake that not only affected the future but also affected past events that you had nothing to do with. I just read that. I'm like, that's so incredibly stupid.
Huh?
But it makes for good storytelling. But the problem with time travel in that it's how much none of it matters in the end, because the way they all make alterations, it's like, you're in a new timeline. This new timeline doesn't matter because it's not your timeline. It's not the correct timeline. Therefore, you're going to go back in time and erase any of this from happening. Erase all those people. It's such a mind fuck to get around, so to speak.
It's true. It's true. And this is why I will very try hard not to use time travel in my stories.
Yeah. I plan to use time travel in one of my stories, but as proof that some of the characters will try changing the past, but they're constantly told it won't change. Then they do it regardless, and only to find out that nothing they did mattered because they changed the fates for other people. That's that other timeline. Oh, if you want to hear a future idea of mine, one thing I wanted to do was I would make an event in my comic that would be kind of traumatic, would really affect people. And then the next issue, what you would see is kind of an alternate timeline. You'd see them right away in that the person wanted things to be different. Like it makes you think like, oh my God, this person changed the past or something, and now we're in a new timeline. But what we're seeing is that instead you have a different timeline, the one character interacting with the character from our timeline, in that the memories are spilling between each other because there's an event coming and they need knowledge from our timeline to prevent it. So in the sense that it'd kind of be like a mind fuck in that we're in an alternate timeline. We think somebody rewrote the past, but in reality, no, it's two timelines talking to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. I explain it poorly. It'd be much cooler if it's when it gets written, but there's so much more cool stuff you can do with time travel rather than the same tropes we keep seeing over and over again.
But it's just that people haven't figured it out how to, really write time travel, differently. Is right. We do follow the same trope. We find, okay, you change something in the past, will affect the future. Pretty simple.
Mhm.
But you have to be more creative than that. It's tough. It's very tough to do.
Yeah. Like one question was, I don't know if you ever saw the TV show Eureka.
No, but I was told it was very good.
Yeah, I would recommend checking it out. There's one episode where they changed the timeline and they were back in their current time, only to find out that they had lived completely different lives. So one character was now married, he had kids when before he hadn't even met that woman who he's married to. So now he's in somebody else's life, and it became a point of contention in that the wife basically said that you killed my husband because you erased everything about him to replace him with yourself.
See that, folks? Real life consequences in these type of things.
I remember I was watching this YouTube video where it's like, what's a movie that when you stop and think about the ending, it gets really bad? And one of them was Back to the Future, because Marty changed his entire family's timeline and they're completely different people. The longer time they spend with Marty, the more they're going to realize that Marty's a completely different person. Not to mention the fact that now the parents are going to be like, why the fuck does Marty look like that Calvin Klein guy from high school?
It's actually interesting. I'm glad you brought this up. Because there was a Back to the Future comic that was released back in 2015 for the anniversary. They actually did a story where George McFly actually goes up to Doc Brown saying, "Where's Calvin Klein?" I forget how that story ended, but I remember it was a very funny explanation.
I'm gonna have to look that up. Oh, speaking of Back to the Future, they just made a Back to the Future and Transformers crossover?
Yes, I did.
Wait, I gotta show you something. One second. Here we go.
Oh, you didn't. Oh, you did.
Gigawatt. It's a transforming DeLorean. I love it.
I have to be honest. I think it was inevitable that was going to happen.
No, like Transformers, like the toy line has been doing a lot of interesting crossovers in that they've been making Transformers of famous vehicles.
Yeah.
Say, like, I have two of them. It's Gigawatt, and which one's the other one? It's Ecto-1, the car from Ghostbusters.
Okay, if they haven't made a crossover for that yet, let's you and I write it.
Oh no, but it's really cool because you have the Transformers universe crossing over with other franchises.
Yeah.
So like they have a story where the Decepticons rewrite the timeline where they won the war. So Doc Brown and some Transformers, including this new guy, Gigawatt, who becomes the time-traveling DeLorean, have to set time correctly. And then the other one, which is, they're all in comic form, which is good, is the Ghostbusters teaming up with Ecto-1 to stop Gozer or something like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I know they also made a Knight Rider Transformer but that was like the first one in the line, and like I never watched Knight Rider, so it didn't really interest me much. But that
And
means
then,
you can, sorry?
I'm sorry, yeah, I was never a big fan of it either.
Yeah. I think it's before our time.
Yeah, I would say that.
Like if we were a little older back in that day, we'd probably be more into it. But like now they're making the Blackbird from X-Men the animated series into a Transformer. And it makes you wonder what other famous vehicles can we turn into Transformers? So there's like,
The Batmobile.
okay, that is a given. Okay, that's the one's a given, but that one's gonna be a little bit harder, like because it's Hasbro and Warner Brothers. You know what I can think of? The Party Wagon from Ninja Turtles.
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah. Oh, what are the famous vehicles?
Okay, okay, this is a bit of a reach, but let's try it anyway. The Enterprise.
I can see that. We have other spaceship Transformers. The Mach 5.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
And you know what?
Easily.
You turn the Mach 5 into a quintuplet changer, like 6-shot.
Oh yeah. Oh, ideas are coming in my head now.
That's the best. That's the best thing about being creative, man. Like you hear something and then boom, like I got an entire universe ready to go in my mind. Okay, from creative to creative. What's an idea you had one time that came from the weirdest place?
Weirdest place. Oh, let me think about this now. Okay. All right. I had this idea. Yeah. Just give me a second. Yeah, this idea where I had this regular guy. You know, average Joe had this girlfriend who was actually possessed by a demon.
Mm-hmm.
And the weirdest place I got this from was The Exorcist.
That's fine.
Yeah, but like, The Exorcist is a straight up horror movie, where this is really an action comedy. And picture this: the girlfriend is, that who originally was before she was possessed, not a nice woman. You didn't know why the hell these two were together, but the demon who possesses her, much nicer.
Like I like you better possessed. You know what that reminds me of? Did you ever watch Futurama?
Yes.
Do you remember this one episode where Fry got a bunch of worms in him, and they literally made him a better version of himself?
Yes.
And like, I liked you better with the worms.
Oh, yeah, because he wasn't such a a useless tool at times.
It also makes me think of something else. Did you watch Scott Pilgrim?
Yes, I did.
Okay, the thing I loved about the ending was Nega Scott in that, because Scott is such a jerk, his negative version would be a much nicer guy than him.
Exact opposite. Yeah, it was perfect.
That's another thing I'd love to see one day, like in a comic where you have like this really jerk ass superhero, and then somebody makes a negative version of him, and it's just like the much nicer version of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but that's the weirdest. Well, what's your weirdest?
Let's see here. Not creating an entire universe, but maybe inspiring a character. Jeepers Creepers.
Okay.
I don't know. There's something about that monster that just like really got my mind going, and I just kept making things based or inspired by it.
Yeah, I can see that because at first, the first film, you're like, where did he come from?
Yeah.
Did he come in a parallel universe? Wait, did he come in from the pits of hell? Where did he come from?
And the whole concept about the monster, how it eats people, and that you can't really kill it because then it just replaces the part you killed with one that he's eaten in the past.
Yeah, that's thinking on your toes and also thinking possible sequels.
Mhm. I know the sequels weren't that good though. The second one was interesting because I love the whole thing about the end where they have him in his cocoon, and he's like, "You have the guy there waiting. So when's that thing gonna bust out? Any day now." And he's like planning to kill it when the second it comes out. I I like what they did. The third one, which apparently had a very, very, very limited release, was like a prequel or something that happened between Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think the other thing I got inspiration from was like maybe some zombie movies, and I'm currently trying to make my own little zombie story, like something that I would make as a one-shot story, like maybe like a long one, like something like 40, 50 pages just as a comic to put out there.
Yeah.
But yeah. But then I'm like, I got to be careful because the longer I wait to do it, the more likely somebody else is to think of the idea.
Yeah, pretty much. It was also interesting. The story I was talking about, I was also influenced by the Evil Dead series.
Hmm.
Yeah, besides demon possession, I was like, this is actually a good example because, it shows how it was completely different from the whole zombie genre.
Mhm.
This is not really zombies.
If you ever really want to play around with flipping the script a little bit on demons and all that,
Yeah.
because I've been doing a little bit of research for my own stories as well, and that if you look at earlier versions of the Bible, there isn't really such a thing as the devil or demons. The most popular example is the word Satan. In the original version, Satan means prosecutor or judge. So Satans were literally a rank of angels that were responsible for prosecuting mortals. So a lot of the times what happened is when they translated it again, they would take the word prosecutor or accuser and replace it with the word Satan. So that's why you would see it so much in the Bible. And even the story of like the rebelling angels and all that, none of them included the word the devil and all that. For example, the word Lucifer comes from the name of another angel who they just called the morning star. There's a lot of research you can do on this, but the fact of the matter is the way the original Bible is written, there isn't really much talk of hell and all that. And that is added much later in later transcripts as a way, whether you're religious or not, just looking at the history of it, is that it's included as to give something to scare people, because in the original Hebrew Bible there is no God. There is a God in the Bible, but there is no devil. There's no hell. That got added in as time went on. So I always thought about playing the idea of using demons in a different way, because that's something that got popularized, especially with somebody like Dante. Like Dante's Inferno is not scripture; it's fan fiction.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate.
Yeah. So what do we base off the idea of hell? The Bible, or do we base it off more of Dante's Inferno?
Well, if you think of a visual point of view, I would say Dante's Inferno because that really shows, at least in his opinion, the levels of hell.
Yeah. And the other thing is that the image of the devil was created by artists, in that they took a lot of depictions of other gods and would mix them in with the idea of their devil. And that's why Lucifer, the devil, looks like Pan Satyr. So when you play around with the ideas of hell in your comics, you can make hell whatever you want. You don't have to go by the Christian beliefs or the Christian images. You can write demons any way you want, because there's always one thing that's confused me. If bad people go to hell, and they're tortured there for being bad people, but the devil is the guy who encourages sin and he brings the souls to him, like there's some kind of disconnect there. If you think about it, you think Spawn. That's a good visualization. All the souls that go to hell become part of Hell's army.
Yeah.
But in Christian mythology, what happens is that when you go to hell, you're being tortured for being a bad person. So the way I look at hell in my stories is that I see it more as a giant prison. So what are demons? They're security guards, they're wardens, they're people there to make sure you get your punishments. Because that's how we see demons. People, they love to torture mortals. So what's the devil? He's the warden.
Yeah.
So that's how I like to see if hell prison escape movie.
Okay, you and I need to have a conversation because I think my story, yeah, that idea could work.
Dude, yes. Like think about it. You just have a prison breakout movie, but it has the skin of hell and demons on it.
Yeah, you and I need to have a discussion.
Yes. I smell a joint collaboration.
And not the first one, I hope. Not the first one.
Oh no, dude. I'm all about the crossovers.
Yeah.
I'm just like in the mindset of I want to finish my current project. But I feel like that's a lot of us in that once we actually get more of our stuff done, where we have more establishments of the universes that we've created, I could see all of us crossing over.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of our styles are very similar, a lot of our tastes are very similar, so it could easily fit in one. It could be also it'd be great to see both of our logos on a comic.
Oh, for sure. I'm just thinking like what Western comic media needs to adapt is more things like Invincible, or and not to sound self-gratifying right now, they need to involve more stories like ours, more people like us, and that people who can write a full series or who can come up with ideas and not be part of the greater universe, have it be their own self-contained thing. Because right now the problem with Marvel and DC is like everything has to fit into it. They even had to bring in Dr. Manhattan into the DC universe as a villain.
Well, I have to blame Jeff Johns for that one.
Yeah. Putting that aside, if you start looking at these things as their own self-contained universes, you could have way more marketing possibilities. I keep saying this, but just look at anime. How many new stuff comes out a year? How many new stories are coming out?
I think, truth be told, if we're looking at not just manga, but also the anime series, I have to say it's like 6 a year.
Yeah.
Because I'm always seeing new stuff on Netflix. I'm always seeing new stuff even on Adult Swim and those type of programs. Because I'm like thinking, wow, there is so much content because they have so many damn ideas.
Mm-hmm. Like right now, you see a lot of like in Western media, you see more like new cartoons that come out every so often.
Yeah.
But cartoons are made for more a child audience. Like, how do I put this? There's the child audience cartoon, and then there's the Adult Swim type of like bad animation on purpose style made for a raunchy audience. There's no in between.
That's true.
You don't see a cartoon or animated project made for people of our age range or teenagers and such. But you see that with something like Invincible, because what is Invincible? It's a comic that's made for people of that age range. Yeah. Like I remember a while back, like they had an Avengers cartoon. I tried watching it, but I'm like, yeah, this is so made for kids. The one Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, which is, in my opinion, one of the best Marvel animated shows, which they had to cancel because they wanted to make a version of the Avengers, which was more closely related to the movies. Whereas the Earth's Mightiest Heroes was based more on the comics interpretations of the characters.
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
Yeah, but and then you have like all the Batman animated movies, which are made for our age demographic because they're based on the comics. Why don't we get a series, a self-contained series? It could be from the comics, it could be its own original property, like that, like Invincible. We need more stuff like that.
Well, you bring up an interesting point because if you look at the original Batman animated series from the '90s, it's pretty much a gap between the kids and adults because adults were watching this as well because it had a lot of adult themes in there, but it was still a kids show.
Yeah,
So,
they treated their audience as smart people. They didn't treat them like children. Even the X-Men animated series, I would say, was similar to that.
yeah, if we get back to that type of thinking, I think we could have even more groundbreaking series. But the problem is, these studios, they think about, the merchandising, they think about the kids.
Mhm.
That's part of the problem. You know, you can still do that, but you can still also have adults watching.
Yeah. Well, let me just say, adults buy toys too, right? Okay. We are a very materialistic group of people, especially like nerds and collectors and all that. Like you can, like I said, once again, look at the goddamn Japanese market, man. You have any idea how many toys of sexy women they put out a year and they sell like gangbusters?
It must be in thousands and thousands.
Actually, funny enough, in Japan they have crane machines where you can win those statues, and they're actually not that expensive.
Yeah.
And they're not just like women figurines; they're also figurines of popular anime characters at that time. Like for example, there's always Dragon Ball, there's always One Piece, and there's always the new hotness, for example.
Yeah.
So like right now, it'd probably be like My Hero Academia. I'm pretty sure you can go into those areas, find a crane machine. Oh, cool! I can win a My Hero Academia statue. And the thing is, since they're in the machines, then they get resold, they get sold again. It's such a market, those things.
Yeah, they need to start looking at that. People, the studios, especially merchandising on our end, they need to start looking towards that because that's like a huge, learning curve right there.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact they still haven't, quite figured it out, they haven't quite gotten it is just mind blowing. Like it's like a waste of potential.
Mm-hmm. I remember actually a very good example of this. Somebody went into a bookstore and they were filming the comic section and the manga section. So when you go to the comic section, it's all like just random collections of different comic stories. Like for example, if you think about it, like you'll probably find Batman: The Killing Joke, Long Halloween. You're not going to find a series. You're just going to find random bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Then you go to the manga sections, like series, which volume of the series, complete series, series after series, all the different volumes.
Well, the fact that like I said, they haven't, tap into that potential of what the medium could be. You know, it's just a waste because, yeah, we do like the type of miniseries that we're talking about. These graphic novels, we like it, but to have a continuing series of books,
Mhm.
that has a whole, condensed universe right there, they would be making millions and millions of copies, but they still don't do it.
Yeah, because they have to put out their Batman and then Super Batman and then Batman Ninja, all like three different series that are all in the same universe. Like, God, how many different X-Men books are there at one time? And they're all like different names, different numbering, different writers. Like, I think there's what, like almost 900 issues of Spider-Man now? But that's not Spider-Man 1 through 900. You have Spider-Man 1 through this, and Amazing Spider-Man 1 through this, and then Ultimate Spider-Man 1 through this, Spectacular Spider-Man 1 through this, yada, yada, yada. It's all spread out throughout so many different runs, so many different writers. And you can kind of get a headache if you start going through it all.
Because it gets lost.
Mm-hmm. Because outside of the original supporting cast in comic books, they fluctuate in and out with who the current writer is. So cool, you have Jeff Johns writing Green Lantern. He's done. So somebody else comes along. Oh, all the supporting cast characters, I don't like them. I'll find a way to kill them to get some cheap thrills. And I'll introduce my cast, who will obviously be long-standing. And then somebody else comes along and does the same thing.
Yeah. It's sad, but it's unfortunately true.
Yeah. Long story short, what we need is more stuff like Invincible, which is the topic of today's discussion. We just went around everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm just happy to know that there's still 3 more episodes of Invincible to go. Like it's 40-minute episodes.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
All right. So let's talk about that episode and we'll finish up for today.
Okay.
What'd you think of it overall? Like what happened, the animation, the fights, like what'd you think of this episode?
you know, just from start to finish, I've always been fascinated by the animation because even though it looks very much like the comic, but I gotta tell you, the story this in this episode, wow, it's definitely getting crazier, but we're getting very close to where the story needs to go.
Hmm.
I always find myself not wanting to go there.
You're like
Yeah, I'm
thinking,
kind of like holding off.
I
Like,
know
no,
exactly what you
stop it.
mean, because when you know things are going to go a certain way, but you're like, maybe it's not going to go that way this time. Maybe they're going to do it differently. But it's kind of this inside mental battle we're having. And I love the last episode, especially the fights. Like they brought Battle Beast in, and I'm like, I don't remember Battle Beast being in the comic this early.
Yeah, that's the thing about the show. They need to change certain things, you know, to bring certain characters forward, but
Hmm.
it's also good.
Oh, for sure. And you can see like, because Lord knows the mystery surrounding Omni Man and what he did, that didn't last that long in the comic book, not to this degree.
Yeah.
I remember that
Uh,
the demon detective was only in there for like one issue.
yeah, that's the thing about these anime series and anime movies. When they have certain characters which they think they can fit into the background a bit more, they expand on a bit.
Yeah.
Like talk about Dark Blood, for example. Yeah, he was in one issue, but he's also trying to find out the mystery of why this happened and who did this.
For sure. I'm just glad to see we're getting some like new original content because, and we got to thank the boys for this in a way.
It's true because they really started the game because they showed, you know, they introduced a show where superheroes are very corrupt,
Hmm.
and it also showed it in a much more, you know, richer sense because you're like, okay, if these guys are corrupt, then what about the normal guys? Well, how are they going to handle this?
Exactly, and not just that, but it also brought in the adapting adult comics, adapting more mature comics into a series, and then realizing, wow, this is actually getting an audience. People are watching this. And then you got Invincible, and they just announced on Netflix Jupiter's Legacy.
Yeah, the trend is continuing.
Hmm.
Once the G's out of the ball, it's not going to go back in.
Yeah. Oh, and one last topic before we finish off. Do you read My Hero Academia?
No, but I should. I really should because I've been hearing great things about it, and I'm surprised I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's actually, once again, the Hirokoshi, the guy who writes it, is inspired by Western comics, and then he wrote his own take. It's like, obviously, there's a lot of Japanese trends in there. Like, for example, they're all in high school to begin with, but it does create a very interesting world. It creates a very interesting set of characters. The biggest hero on the planet is called All Might, and he has a very American theme to him. It's really funny. Uh, but yeah, and like I'm reading it right now as it's going forward, and I think they're gonna do a time skip in a while. Like they're gonna move away from the kid day, so to speak. But
Right.
I would totally recommend checking it out. It has a lot of new takes on superhero tropes because it is a superhero story. But for example, and what I was saying earlier, heroes work out of agencies.
Yes. Okay.
So the way the heroes work in the world, you get a license to be a hero because to be a superhero, you have to go through trainings from when you're a teenager. You have to sign up for it. So you get trained by other heroes. You're taught about saving civilians. You're taught about rescue situations. You're taught about what you're supposed to prioritize. And then you apply to different agencies in that, okay, cool, yeah, this agency, we see a relatively this much amount of crime in this area. These are the type of people we have to worry about. So you're going to go work here. And they have different places like this across the world. And it's like a more organized sense of superheroes.
Yeah. You know what? I should read this.
Yeah, because it's very interesting to read them because it's an entire different culture's take on how to do superheroes. Because in Western media, tell me, how much have you seen the flying guy with the cape who's super strong?
Not very.
And more often enough, I can think of like 10 different Superman clones off the top of my head. Another one you should probably check out, which is another superhero story, is Tiger and Bunny.
Tiger and Bunny. Okay.
It has a name that has nothing to do with the series, but it's actually a superhero story, and it's also really good too. I remember I made the analogy that the first villain is like the Joker, the second villain is like Lex Luthor.
Okay.
In that the first villain's more chaotic and destructive, and the second main villain of the series is more planning, methodical, and powerful. And that's actually a 26 episode series. So you can sit down, watch it over a weekend, and like, oh, cool, this is a new take on a superhero show.
All right, I had to check these out then.
Yeah.
You said you had Tiger and the Bunny, right?
Tiger and Bunny and My Hero Academia.
Okay. I can ensure to watch then.
Yay. So I think that's going to be it for this talk. Ian, honestly, man, we should talk like this more often. I love it.
Yes, we should. Absolutely. Yeah, you're fun to talk to.
Yeah. And what we'll do is, if you're serious about it, let's talk about the Demon Prison Break. Tell me the story you're working on. I'll read up everything, and we'll sit down and talk and work that out.
Absolutely.